All right, thanks Yuri for the invitation. So, as you, my name is over here. My name is Dat Tran. I'm actually the co-head of Idealo's data team. And today, actually, I want to talk a little bit of the experience that I actually have with data transformation, digital transformation, AI transformation in some way, right? With big companies that basically I experienced with, because in my past I was also a consultancy, and also sharing some of the stories that, what I did here with Idealo. Since we don't have much time, and basically this is a talk that I've given also before, and actually it's 40 minutes, I literally shortened it to hopefully 15 minutes. I want to go very fast with my introduction. So I work at Idealo at the moment. For that, I used to work for Pivotal, which is a technology company, and in my long due past, I also worked for Accenture for a short while. Usually I give a lot of technical talks, but today, this talk is not very technical, so don't expect a lot of mathematics or anything else, but it's more like, telling about the experiences and joy that I've taken, and maybe also inspire you guys basically when you come back at your workplace. A little bit started at Idealo. Of course, my focus is building out the data science and data engineering team. And of course, we're doing state-of-the-art things. So this is some of the projects that we've been doing in deep learning. So for example, my team has been working on assessing hotel images quality based on aesthetic and technical quality. We're also working on projects, for example, like low to high resolution, right? And of course, besides the deep learning projects, we have problems in optimization, for example, recommendation engine, right? Or also shallow learning problems like sales prediction or customer lifetime value prediction. So everything that you can imagine for an e-commerce company. If you're interested in what we do, so we open source most of our stuff. So our code is on GitHub, and we also write about the stuff that we do. This year, for example, we open source our code for the neural image assessment, which is based on the Google paper with our implementation, and we're going to do a lot of more stuff coming on forward. Yeah, so let me start with a typical story that some of you might already know, maybe at your company, right? So let's say it's the start of a year, maybe last year, right? And basically your manager read something on the newspaper, right? And then he found the topic, for example, let's say blockchain in this case, right? He found it quite interesting. And this question is like, he comes to you and asks yourself the question, okay, so this is very cool, so how do we do this, right? You yourself, you have no idea what this is, and you ask yourself the question, well, okay, what am I going to do, right? And in this case, this is just for blockchain, but also when you read the cartoon, they also talk about artificial intelligence. Maybe this is a situation that occurred to you as well in your past or at some companies. This is very annoying, by the way.
Don't be irritated. It could have worked perfectly, but we wanted, for it to feel a bit more innovative, so it's cutting in and out. But
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, most of the reality is actually that many companies really don't understand what they want to do, right? Maybe, at the beginning of the year, or some people start to write a strategy paper, right? And, they write about digitalization or artificial intelligence, right? And then it somehow becomes a buzzword into the company. But the problem is, most of the companies, they don't really have the foundation to do actually AI or machine learning in general. And basically, what they do is they get help, right? And they get help, for example, from external consultancies, or freelancers. And then what do? Well, some of them suggest to build a digital lab or some new division that looks fancy. This is something that I wanted to represent with this picture. And basically, it's very shiny, right? It's very cool. You work into this new offices. You might also have a kicker. You have your Kubernetes, right? It's a very good situation. But the problem is, over the next 3 years, what I've seen at many digital labs is they kind of end in a very devastating situation because the expectation that they set of upfront was very high because you basically hired some kind of people who has no idea about the topic also in the last 3 or 4 years before, and then you just imagine that they probably kind of bring digitalization to you, but they really also don't know what this is, right? And the moral of the story is in a lot of data initiatives, you actually put in a lot of people who actually have no clue what they actually do and what they actually want. Also, they spend a lot of money, so I've been in a lot of digital labs and journeys with companies where where they spend millions of euros onto things which actually didn't work, right? And then when you really spend this kind of money through consultancy and basically don't build the knowledge internally, this is also not very sustainable. So they were never able to basically create a very sustainable kind of tech culture with the company, right, to drive kind of the agenda for those companies. Yeah. And the focus of my presentation is basically onto this agile culture. So I'm not going to talk about which kind of consultancy you can take basically to become digital, or also which people you need to hire basically to lead your strategy, roadmap, or whatever. The focus of my talk today is, as I said, on one of the cultural aspects of digitalization, and one thing is actually the MVP approach. Who of you have actually heard of MVP before? I think almost everyone, right? Yeah, great. So this is basically a quote that I took from Eric Ries's book. Eric Ries is very famous for the Lean Startup book. He's actually one of my ex-colleagues because he's on a pivotal payroll. And this guy basically said, very simple thing. It's not very difficult. It's not kind of rocket science. Just build something that is simple. Get it out, get the product out, right, and then get the most of the learning of it. It's just so simple that it's so difficult for us, right? Because actually most of the simple thing is too complex for us humans, basically. And basically, this approach is actually very important because there are many companies basically who should basically listen to this approach. Actually one of this company?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is basically the company is called Juicero. It's actually a very simple idea, right? You build a very well-designed machine, basically to kind of press some juice out, right? And the biggest problem though is this machine. It was very, very expensive. So when it got released, it cost $700, right? And and then besides the money that you have to pay for this gadget, you also need to pay like $8 for the kind of thing, like the juice that you get with it, right? The biggest problem though is if they have done like some little research, right, like in the MVP approach kind of way, basically they would know that you don't need this gadget basically to get the juice. You can just use your bare hand basically to press out these juice packages, right? So you probably save us so much money. More of the story. So the story ended very bad for the guy. The guy actually kind of said that he's the next Steve Jobs, but it didn't end well for him. So the company, after 2 years, kind of went out of business. So it was like a very short introduction to tell you why MVP is important, because of course. What I want to tell you today is not about anything else, but about data. So it has something to do with data at the end of the day, right? And if you think like data, right? Data, and especially data products as products, then you also can think like take the MVP approach into this account, right? Basically to create your product. And over my career and over my experiences, I basically split this kind of MVP approach into 3 areas. So one is actually about the model itself, right? The second one is the platform that you want to create, and the third one is more the product itself. So if you think about modeling, right? So I've seen a lot of companies basically, the first thing that they do is, can we not take a deep learning model, right? For this kind of problem, for this and that, and then you yourself, the question is, okay, why? Because most of the time, like a very simple logistical regression, a very simple model would already work out. In terms of platform, I have very interesting stories that I probably could tell you, all night long with so many big companies. Like if you think about 3 or 4 years ago, the first thing that they did was not, like let's take a problem, like, let's solve something small, No, let's just spend 10 millions on a Hadoop cluster, okay? So before we do anything, and then let's spend another 2 years basically transform the data, right? And then basically maybe something comes out, right? But then 3 years later, Hadoop is outdated, right? Everyone wants GPU now. Everyone wants to get GPU cluster or whatever, right? Before doing something else. And the data point is also important, the product point. Because sometimes, when you join a company, the most challenging problem is that they're looking for data science or a data science team to solve some problems. But the problem sometimes is so stupid that you don't really need a team to do that, because just to do some statistic on an Excel sheet is where you don't need a data science or machine learning team for this, right? And basically the product aspect is not really taken into account. It's like, how can machine learning or data science basically help you integrate in the future, right? To help like solving the vision that you have as a company, right? For example, do you want to basically improve the customer experience for your customer, like how can machine learning basically help this, right? And not basically solving some mathematical problems that you can hire a statistician or mathematician for this. Okay, it's not working. I think the computer crashed. Okay. Okay. So who knows what this is actually?
Virtual reality?
VR? VR? No, not close. Not very close. So because of time, this is actually a car, and this is actually a self-driving car. Yes. So basically, you didn't really create anything fancy here. So you didn't create any model. So this is what basically Ford did in the early '60s, and basically, they just put a guy into a car and disguise it as a seat and drive it like as a self-driving car. And this is the case where you test a product, right, instead of like an algorithm. Because at the end of the day, you can like put so many top engineers on solving a deep learning problem, but then when you cannot kind of release it in the product or use it in the product, it doesn't make any sense, right? And this is basically like a simple example for you, like to get motivated again. When you start with a problem, in a product space, try to think simple first, and not like start with the most fancy algorithm to solve any problem. Yeah. The second quiz, who knows what this is actually?
Cargo bullet?
Yeah. That's correct.
It's cool stuff.
Yeah. So the gentleman in the front is pretty right. So this is actually a scene from a relic from the Second World War. Basically, the Americans, they went to the Pacific, right? They had a war with Japan, and basically what they did is they brought a lot of cargoes, right? The cargoes is a lot of supplies. And the supplies is good, right? You have water, you have food, and then they brought us to these Aborigines. And the Aborigines were quite happy because, wow, free food, that's nice, that's very cool. But the problem is the war ended in 1945, which is also good and not unfortunate. But the problem is that the Aborigines, they were thinking like, okay, wow, where are the gods? Where did they go, right? And what happened is, they tried to imitate basically what the Americans did. So what did the Americans do? So they had them kind of, an airplane. They had the guy, basically waving at the airport as well, right? So everything, when they thought that when these guys were doing this, the gods would come from the sky, right? Basically. So what does it have to do with digitalization or data transformation in general? I would say that digital labs are cargo code, right? Because the biggest problem, with digital labs is, especially here in Germany, is they try to copy Silicon Valley companies, right? And I work for a Silicon Valley company, and basically, put some good money, as I said, right? Doing some fancy stuff. You're agile when you have some stickies, right? So this is something that you always also need to remember. And basically, what they don't get is that actually most of the companies in the Valley area, they have to move to the Valley because cost of living and all the rents got so expensive in San Francisco. And that was one of the reasons why they needed to go into these factories, build up the offices there, and not because of everything was fancy, right? And this is what most of the companies don't get. And actually, the core point for a lot of the success that we've seen, right, at this tech companies in Silicon Valley is what I say, they build up a very strong engineering culture, right? So those companies get it to build this kind of culture. They build things like, they understand things like test room development, CI/CD systems, where you basically create software as fast as possible, right, and deploy it every time, every minute, so that you can test out those things. The other things is very closely related to the MVP approach, right? So many companies, in Germany, when they think as being agile, means hopefully they can release something in 2 years instead of 3 years, right? And not in cycles like 2 months, maybe even weeks. So this is something that we haven't really learned so far pretty well. And then, of course, many teams don't think machine learning as product, right? They see more machine learning teams as like, yeah, these are the nerds, these are the math guys, they just implement the model, right? And then we will, make sure that we use it somewhere. But this is also mostly not the case here at many companies. Yeah, and also one of the important things is, of course, to have the right people, right? So it doesn't, make sense to build a digital lab with only business managers, right? Just as a top, and then you try to hire some tech people. Actually, it's very funny because I brought up an advertisement from a company that actually is very on top of this building here. This is like an advertisement that I got from last year. I don't know if they changed so far, because in my last talk there was actually someone from Deutsche Telekom, and he actually said, "You are right. I will use your presentation now and give it to management to change this." But I have no idea if he really changed it. But if you look at the advertisement, actually, unfortunately, it's in German. You have to see, okay, this is the biggest problem. Tech people, most of the tech people nowadays, they don't speak German, okay? It's just face it. We don't have a lot of tech people in Germany that we produce, right? So we get a lot of non-native German speakers. So when you write this kind of advertisement, it's very difficult. You limit to a pool of only a percentage of people that live on this earth here, right? And especially for tech people, it's even less. And then the most crazy thing is, if you're talking about data science and machine learning in general, I mean, of course, this field has been around for 15 years, right? When you go to 1950s, there was already a guy, talking about machine learning. But if you think about the stuff that we do right now, there's so many new things. How can someone has 10 years of experience in doing this stuff? I don't know. If you find this guy, good luck. Or what does a guy have to do? Use JavaScript? I have no idea, right? I mean, this is like no idea. I mean, I don't know who worked this. Also, the funny thing is, yeah, I mean, I'm looking for data scientists, right? Or am I looking for data engineers? I mean, I'm not looking for someone who's managing a system here in general, right? So there's many things that I wanted to show you. This is like when you read this kind of advertisement and you are looking for some certain kind of people, that want to drive your agenda, you're probably not getting anyone with this advertisement. Yeah. So coming fast to the summary. Everything that I said today, is kind of based on experience. A lot of these things is also controversial, but of course, I'm speaking in front of you. That means some of the stuff probably work, right? So it's not like that I'm here to bullshit you. So, but I rather see all these things that I said today more as inspiration, right? Not like this is something that you need to do, because every company, is on a different stage, has a different organizational structure. So maybe you can take some inspiration back to your company and kind of like think about this again, right? As I said, for me, the most important thing for a company is to establish an iterative, like a process, where you can basically also take risk, right? So every company is they always say that that you can take risks and so on, but to have this kind of culture, it still needs a lot of time, and basically you are maybe part of a big company, right? And to kind of propose this, and implement this, is something that we do have to do step by step, day by day, right? It's not something that comes next morning. And of course, hiring is difficult. So if you really want to have good people, you have also to adapt to these kind of changes, right? So don't just do as what you have been doing the last 15 years, right, or 20 years, or how long you've been here on the market. But you have to adapt to it. You have to change yourself as well to stay competitive in some way. Yeah. So thanks for the.